My father-in-law borrowed my car for the weekend and didn't bring it back. Then when he finally reappeared, he confessed he sold it to pay off his alimony, and now his family says I overreacted by calling the police. What would you do if you lent your father-in-law your car for the weekend, and he came back 3 days late, on foot, and told you he sold it? My name is Derek Hollis, and this is the story of how the man who walked his daughter down the aisle stole the only thing I owned outright, sold it for a third of what it was worth, lied about why, and then watched his entire family line up to tell me I was wrong for treating a crime like a crime. Let me tell you about the car first. Because people keep saying, it's just a car, and every time I hear that phrase, I know I'm talking to someone who has never had to build their life from nothing. It was a 2019 Ford F-150. Dark blue. Clean title. Paid off. Mine. That truck was the first thing of real value I ever owned. I don't mean that casually. I mean it literally. I grew up in a house where nothing was ours. My mother rented everything. From the furniture to the apartment to the car she drove to her night shift at the warehouse. I wore hand-me-downs until I was 14 and outgrew every cousin I had. I didn't know what a savings account was until I was 19. The concept of owning something, of having your name on a title that says, this belongs to you and nobody can take it, was foreign to me the way a second language is foreign. You can learn it, but it never quite feels natural. I bought that truck when I was 25, after 3 years of saving while working as an HVAC installer. $4,200 down. 60 months of payments. Every month, on time, from an account I watched like a hawk. When I made the last payment, the bank sent me the title, and I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes holding a piece of paper that said my name and feeling something I'd never felt before, permanence. This thing was mine. Not rented. Not borrowed. Not conditional on someone else's schedule or mood or financial situation. Mine. I could touch it and know it wasn't going anywhere. I kept that truck clean the way other people keep family heirlooms. Washed it every Sunday. Changed the oil on schedule. Fixed things before they broke. It had 114,000 miles on it and still looked like it had 50. Because when you have never owned anything, the first thing you own becomes a covenant. A promise you make to yourself. I will take care of this, because this is proof that I can take care of myself. This truck was not a vehicle to me. It was a document. A physical, 4,000-pound, dark blue, V8, powered document that said, Derek Hollis was born with nothing, and Derek Hollis built something, and that something is parked in the driveway with a clean title and his name on it. Every time I turned the key, I was signing that document again. Every time I washed it on Sunday, I was renewing the contract. It was the most important thing I owned, not because of what it cost, but because of what it proved. Now let me tell you about Don Whitaker. Don is my father-in-law. He's 59 years old. He has a handshake that makes you feel like the most important person in the room and a financial history that would make an accountant weep. Divorced twice. The second divorce, from Marissa, left him with alimony payments he resented and a lifestyle he couldn't afford on his salary as a regional sales rep for a plumbing supply company. Don is the kind of man who has never met a problem he couldn't charm his way around, and never met a bill he couldn't defer, ignore, or redirect to someone else. I liked Don when I first met him. Everyone likes Don. That's the problem. Likability is his currency, and he spends it the way he spends everything else, freely, recklessly, and with the assumption that more will appear when he needs it. He tells stories that make you laugh until your ribs hurt. He remembers your birthday, your dog's name, your favorite team. He's warm in a way that feels genuine until you realize that warmth is a tool, not a temperature. Camille, my wife, adores her father. She's his oldest. She sees him through a filter that softens every edge, rounds every corner, and reframes every failure as a circumstance rather than a choice. Dad's going through a tough time. She's been saying that since we started dating 6 years ago. The tough time has never ended because Don's tough time isn't a phase. It's a lifestyle. It's the permanent state of a man who has never once connected his choices to their consequences because there has always been someone nearby willing to absorb the impact. 2 weeks before the car disappeared, Don called Camille. I was in the living room. I heard her side of the conversation, which was enough to reconstruct his. How much? Dad, that's a lot. I don't know if we can. I'll talk to Derek. She came to me after. Carefully. The way she approaches anything involving her father and my wallet, which is to say with the preemptive apology already loaded. Dad needs $8,000. He's behind on his alimony. Marissa's lawyer is threatening contempt. He says he could go to jail. We don't have $8,000 to give away, Camille. I know. I told him that. He's really scared. He's been really scared 4 times in the last 2 years. And each time, we've been the ones who paid for his fear. We covered his car insurance when it lapsed because he spent the premium money on God knows what. Twice. We paid his electric bill when it was 2 months overdue and the power company was threatening to disconnect. We lent him $1,500 for rent that was due in 3 days. Money he swore he would return in 2 weeks and has never mentioned again. Each time, Camille came to me with the same careful approach, the same preemptive apology, the same explanation that reframed Don's chronic irresponsibility as temporary hardship. And each time, I said yes, because I loved my wife and she loved her father, and the path of least resistance was paved with my money. We've covered his car insurance twice, paid his electric bill once, and lent him $1,500 for rent that he never paid back. She didn't argue. She couldn't. The math was the math. We were a single-income household at the time. Camille was between jobs, looking, interviewing, but nothing had landed yet. $8,000 was not a number we could absorb without damaging ourselves. She called Don back, told him we couldn't do it. I heard his voice through the phone, not the words, just the pitch. Disappointed, but not surprised. The pitch of a man who expected the no and was already calculating plan B. I should have recognized that pitch for what it was. 2 weeks later, Friday afternoon, Don shows up at our house, unannounced but smiling, which is how Don always arrives, as if his presence is a gift that requires no invitation. He's standing in the driveway, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at my truck the way a man looks at a menu. Hey, Derek, I need a favor. My car's in the shop, won't be ready until Monday. Can I borrow your truck for the weekend? I've got a thing out in Greenville, a buddy I promised I'd help move. I'll have it back Sunday night. I hesitated. I always hesitate when Don asks for anything, because the ask is never the whole story. It's the visible part of the iceberg, and below the waterline is a mass of unstated need that you don't see until you've already hit it. Camille was behind me. I felt her hand on my lower back, the light, encouraging pressure that wives apply when they want you to say yes without saying say yes out loud. Come on, babe. It's just the weekend. Just the weekend. Just the car. Just my father-in-law. Just the man who asked for $8,000 2 weeks ago and was told no and is now standing in my driveway asking for the keys to an asset worth $28,000. I handed him the keys. Watched him take them with both hands. The way a man receives something he has already decided to destroy but needs you to believe he respects. He closed his fingers around them and said, I'll take good care of her. Her. He called my truck her. A term of endearment for a vehicle he would sell to a stranger in less than 18 hours. I watched him adjust the seat, the mirrors. Watched him pull out of my driveway in the truck I'd spent 3 years paying for. The truck that represented everything I'd built from nothing. And I told myself what I always told myself when Don was involved. It'll be fine. It's just the weekend. Friday night, nothing. Saturday, a text. Truck runs great. Back tomorrow. Sunday, nothing. I texted at noon. What time you heading back? No response. Texted at 4. At 7. At 9. Nothing. Called at 10. Straight to voicemail. Monday morning. No truck. No Don. No response to 6 texts and 3 calls. I drove by his apartment in Camille's car. Not there. Called his buddy in Greenville. Don? Haven't heard from him. We didn't have any plans this weekend. That sentence opened a trapdoor. There was nobody. There was no move. There was no thing in Greenville. The entire premise of the borrow was a lie, which meant the borrow itself was something else entirely. Monday evening, a voicemail. 11 seconds. Derek, it's Don. I need to talk to you about the truck. Don't panic. Just call me back. Don't panic. The 2 words people say exclusively before delivering news that justifies panic. I called back. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Tuesday morning, more texts, more calls, more silence. Camille was scared now, genuinely. Not about the truck, about her father. What if something happened to him? Something had happened. But it hadn't happened to Don. It had happened to me. I just didn't know it yet. Tuesday afternoon. 3 o'clock. A knock at the door. I opened it, and there was Don Whitaker, standing on my porch in the same jacket he'd worn Friday. 3 days of stubble on his face. No keys in his hand. and no truck in my driveway. He looked at me the way a dog looks at you after it's destroyed something it knows you love. Not truly sorry. Just sorry it got caught. Can I come in? We sat at the kitchen table. Camille stood by the counter. Don folded his hands, unfolded them, folded them again. Then he said the sentence that I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. I sold the truck. 3 words. Subject, verb, object. Grammatically simple. Emotionally nuclear. I stared at him. Camille made a sound that wasn't a word, just a sharp intake of breath, the kind your body makes when it absorbs an impact before your brain has time to interpret it. You sold my truck. I had to. Derek, listen. I was behind on alimony. 8 months behind. Marissa's lawyer filed a contempt motion. I was looking at jail time. Real jail time. I didn't have any other option. I drove it to a lot on Saturday morning, and they gave me cash. I used it to pay Marissa. I'm caught up now. The contempt motion is dropped. I was going to tell you sooner, but I needed to make sure the payment cleared first. He delivered this like a man presenting a business case. Problem, solution, outcome. As if selling someone else's property without permission was a strategic decision that required a debrief rather than an arrest. How much did they give you? I asked. My voice was calm. The dangerous kind of calm, the kind that sits on top of something molten. $9,000. $9,000. My truck was worth $28,000. He sold it for $9,000. 68% below market value. Because that's what happens when you walk into a lot with no authorization, no legitimate paperwork, and the desperation of a man willing to take whatever cash he can get before someone asks questions. How did you sign the title? It's in my name. Don's eyes dropped to the table. I handled it. You forged my signature. He didn't deny it. He just sat there, hands folded, looking at the wood grain of my kitchen table like it contained an answer he could use. Don, I said, I need you to understand something. You didn't borrow my truck. You stole it. You forged my name on a legal document. You sold my property to a third party for a fraction of its value. And you used the money for a debt that has nothing to do with me. That's not a family favor. That's a felony. Derek, come on. I was desperate. I was going to go to jail. So to avoid jail, you committed a crime that could put you in jail. He didn't have a response for that. Because there isn't one. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, closed the door, picked up my phone, and I called the police. Camille followed me. Derek, what are you doing? Reporting a theft. He's my father. And he stole my truck. Both things are true, Camille. One doesn't cancel the other. Can't we just talk to him? Work something out. He sold my truck for $9,000 and forged my signature on the title. What exactly would we work out? He doesn't have the truck. He doesn't have the money. The money is gone. The truck is gone. There's nothing to work out. There's only a police report and whatever comes after. She was crying. Not for the truck. For her father. For the image of Don she'd been maintaining since childhood. The image that was cracking in real time like plaster over a wall that was never as solid as it looked. I didn't enjoy her pain. But I couldn't absorb it this time. Not at the cost of my own. The officers arrived 40 minutes later. 2 of them. A man and a woman. Both young. Both professional. Both carrying the neutral expressions of people who have learned to enter domestic situations without assumptions. I met them at the door. Camille was upstairs. She could not be in the room for this, and I did not ask her to be. Some things a wife should not have to watch, and her husband filing a police report against her father is one of them. Don was still at the kitchen table. He had not moved, had not called a lawyer, had not tried to leave. I think he genuinely believed, right up until the moment the officer asked him to step outside, that this was a situation that could be resolved with a conversation and a handshake and the application of enough charm to make the problem go away the way every problem in Don Whitaker's life had gone away, by someone else absorbing the cost. Don was still at the kitchen table. He didn't try to leave. I think he genuinely believed, right up until the moment the officer asked him to step outside, that this was a situation that could be resolved with a conversation and a handshake. That's Don's whole worldview. Everything is negotiable. Everything is fixable. And consequences are things that happen to people who aren't charming enough to avoid them. I gave my statement. Showed the title. Showed the registration. Showed the texts proving I'd lent the vehicle for the weekend only. Don gave his statement too. He admitted everything, because Don has never understood that honesty after the crime doesn't erase the crime. He thought confessing was the same as resolving. It isn't. The report was filed. Don was allowed to leave pending investigation. He walked out of my house, passed my driveway where my truck should have been, and got into his son Lance's car without looking back. Then the family detonated. It started that evening. Lance called first. Don's son, Camille's brother. He'd been close with Don through every catastrophe, defending every failure, financing every excuse. You called the cops on Dad? Are you serious right now? He sold my truck, Lance. He was going to go to jail. For alimony. Do you understand what that means? He panicked. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to return a phone call. Selling someone's vehicle and forging their signature is a crime. It's a family matter, Derek. We handle family matters as a family. You don't bring police into family. Your father brought police into family when he committed a felony. I just made the call. Then Camille's aunt. Then Don's sister. Then two cousins I'd met once at Thanksgiving. One by one, the Whitaker family mobilized with the efficiency of a crisis response team. Except the crisis they were responding to wasn't the theft. It was the consequences of the theft. Nobody called to ask how I was getting to work. Nobody offered to help replace the truck. Nobody acknowledged the forgery or the financial loss or the fact that a man I'd trusted with my most valuable possession had destroyed that trust in under 24 hours. What they acknowledged was my reaction, my overreaction. Then came the family meeting. Don's sister Pam organized it. We need to sit down as a family and talk this through. Camille begged me to go. I went, against my better judgment, because refusing would have given them the narrative they wanted. Derek won't even try. Derek doesn't care about family. Derek chose a truck over his father-in-law. I walked into Pam's living room on a Wednesday evening and counted 15 people. 15 Whitakers. Some I knew well, some I had met once at a barbecue 2 years ago. All arranged in a semicircle of couches and dining chairs and 2 folding chairs that had been brought in from the garage, which told me this had been planned, organized, coordinated. Pam had made coffee. There were cookies on the table. Cookies. As if this were a book club meeting and not a tribunal designed to pressure a theft victim into dropping charges against the thief. 15 Whitakers, arranged in a semicircle of couches and folding chairs, and one Derek Hollis, standing in the doorway like a defendant entering a courtroom that has already decided the verdict. Pam spoke first. Derek, we appreciate you coming. We want to talk about what happened and find a path forward. As a family. A path forward, I repeated. Sure. Let's start with the fact that Don stole my truck, forged my name, sold it for $9,000 when it's worth $28,000, and has not offered a single dollar of restitution, an apology, or even an acknowledgement that what he did was wrong. That's where we are. Where's the path forward from there? The room shifted. Not toward me. Away from me. 15 people collectively decided, in the space of one sentence, that I was the problem. Not Don, who was sitting in the corner, quiet for the first time in his life, letting his family do the work he'd always let them do. He was desperate, someone said. He was going to lose his freedom, someone else added. It's just a truck, Derek. You can replace a truck. You can't replace a father. He said he's sorry. He hadn't said he was sorry. Not once. Not at my kitchen table. Not to the police. Not in any text or call or message since Tuesday. But the Whitaker family had collectively decided he was sorry, the way they collectively decided everything about Don. They decided the narrative, assigned the roles, and expected the actors to perform. Don was the victim. I was the villain. The truck was a prop. I stood in that living room and said what nobody wanted to hear. Don asked Camille for $8,000 2 weeks before he took my truck. We said no. So he borrowed the truck and sold it instead. This wasn't a desperate act. This was a plan. He asked for money, was denied, and converted my property into cash because he couldn't get it any other way. That's not desperation. That's premeditation. Silence. And here's what none of you seem to care about. That truck was worth $28,000. He sold it for $9,000. That's a $19,000 loss. Where's that money coming from? Who's making that right? Because I don't see a single person in this room reaching for a checkbook. More silence. The kind that fills a room when the math is undeniable and the outrage is expensive. And one more thing, I said. I looked directly at Don. I called Marissa. Don's face changed. The color left it the way water leaves a broken glass. All at once, with nowhere to go. I called your ex-wife this morning. Told her you said you sold my truck to pay your alimony arrears. You know what she said? The room was perfectly still. She said the alimony was current. She said you weren't behind. She said no contempt motion was filed. She said she hasn't received any lump payment from you in over a year. I let that settle. Let every person in that room do the math they should have done before organizing a meeting to defend a man they'd never once held accountable. The alimony story was a lie. You didn't sell my truck to avoid jail. You sold it for something else. And I don't know what that something else is, but I know it wasn't what you told me, and it wasn't what you told this room. Don said nothing. His face was the gray white of a man whose last card has been played, and it's been turned face up for everyone to see. I found out later, through the investigation, through the paper trail, that financial crimes always leave where the $9,000 actually went. A sports gambling platform. Not a bookie, not a casino, not the romanticized version of gambling that movies make look sophisticated. An app on his phone. A digital slot machine that he fed with money the way you feed coins into a parking meter, except the meter never stopped counting and the parking space never materialized. An online account with a history of deposits and losses that spanned 2 years and totaled, according to the financial records subpoenaed during the investigation, over $47,000 in cumulative losses. An online account with a history of deposits and losses that went back 2 years. Don wasn't behind on alimony. He was behind on bets. And when the bets caught up, he looked around for something to sell, and the easiest thing to sell was the truck belonging to the son-in-law who'd already said no to cash. I watched the room process it. 15 people who had come to defend Don were now sitting in a silence that tasted like metal. Aunt Pam was looking at the floor. Lance was staring at Don with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something between confusion and the early stages of a betrayal he was not yet ready to name. Don's sister Carol had her hand over her mouth, and Don himself was perfectly still, the way a man goes still when every exit has been sealed and the only direction left is through the truth he has been running from. Nobody asked where the money actually went. Not then. Maybe they already knew, in the way that families know the things they agree not to say. Maybe they had been covering for Don's gambling the same way they covered for everything else, with silence and redirection and the unspoken agreement that naming the problem would require solving it, and solving it would require effort, and effort was something the Whitaker family reserved exclusively for protecting Don from the consequences of being Don. The meeting ended without resolution. Because there was no resolution that 15 Whitakers could agree on that didn't require Don to be held accountable, and accountability was the one thing that family had never, in 59 years, asked of him. Camille and I drove home in silence. A silence that lasted, in various forms, for weeks. The marriage didn't end. I want to be clear about that. But it fractured. Not the way a bone breaks, with a clean line and a clear recovery plan. The way a windshield cracks, with a single point of impact and a web of damage that spreads in every direction and makes it hard to see the road. Camille was caught between her father and her husband, and for a long time, she couldn't see that choosing between us wasn't the problem. The problem was that she'd spent her entire life choosing Don, protecting Don, financing Don, and she'd married a man who was finally drawing the line that she never could. Her anger at me wasn't really about the police call. It was about the fact that I'd made visible what she'd spent 30 years keeping invisible. We fought. Not screaming fights, quiet ones, the kind that happen in kitchens and hallways, and the 3 feet of mattress between 2 people who used to sleep touching and now sleep like strangers on a bus. The kind where the distance between 2 people in the same bed can feel like a canyon. She said, "You didn't have to call the police." I said, "Your father didn't have to sell my truck." She said, "You're going to destroy my family." I said, "Your family was destroyed long before I got here. I'm just the first person who refused to pretend it wasn't." That one landed. I saw it hit. And I wish I could say it felt good, but it didn't. It felt like surgery. Necessary, painful, and performed without anesthesia on both of us. The police investigation moved forward. The car lot was identified. The forged title was entered as evidence. Don was charged with theft by conversion, forgery, and fraud. His lawyer negotiated. There were hearings. There was paperwork. There was the slow, grinding machinery of a legal system processing a crime that a family wanted to call a misunderstanding. The truck was recovered. Not intact, not pristine, not the way I'd kept it. The lot had already started prepping it for resale, new plates, cleaned interior, my personal belongings removed and discarded. But the VIN matched, the title fraud was documented, and the vehicle was returned to me through a process that took 11 weeks and more patience than I thought I had. The investigation revealed the lot for what it was, a semi-legitimate operation that specialized in buying vehicles with questionable paperwork at steep discounts. Don was not their first seller with a forged signature and a desperate story. He was just the first one whose victim filed a police report instead of writing it off as a family matter. The lot owner cooperated once it became clear that not cooperating would invite a level of scrutiny his business model could not survive. I got it back on a Thursday afternoon, drove it home from the impound lot, parked it in my driveway, sat in the driver's seat for a long time with my hands on the wheel and the engine off. It smelled different, felt different, not because anything mechanical had changed, but because something intangible had been taken from it that no repair shop could restore. The feeling of safety. The feeling that this thing was mine and nobody could take it. That innocence was gone, replaced by the knowledge that someone I'd trusted, someone I'd fed at my table and welcomed into my home, had driven this truck to a stranger and exchanged it for cash to cover a gambling debt he'd lied about. Don pleaded to a reduced charge 6 months after the arrest. His lawyer negotiated it down from felony theft and forgery to misdemeanor theft by conversion. The forgery charge was dropped in exchange for the plea, which my lawyer said was standard but which felt, to me, like a discount on accountability that Don had not earned and did not deserve. Misdemeanor theft. Probation. Restitution, meaning he's technically required to pay back the difference between what he sold the truck for and its actual value. He's made 2 payments so far. Small ones. Late ones. The kind of payments that say, I'm complying just enough to avoid jail rather than, I'm making this right. I expect the payments will stop eventually. That's what happens with Don. The urgency fades, the charm comes back, and the cycle restarts. Camille and I are still together. Not because the fracture healed, but because we both decided, separately and then together, that the fracture was worth repairing. She started going to therapy in January. Not couples therapy, not yet. Individual. She needed to untangle 30 years of enabling before she could show up in a room with me and talk honestly about what had happened. Her therapist, she told me later, asked her a question in the second session that broke something open. If a stranger did to Derek what your father did, what would you call it? She said the word before she could stop herself. Theft. And then she sat with it. Sat with the fact that the only reason she had not called it theft from the beginning was because the thief was someone she loved. And love, she was learning, does not change the nature of the act. It only changes how much it hurts to name it. She went to therapy, not because I asked her to, but because she finally saw the pattern she'd been standing inside of for 30 years. She described it to me once, after a session. It's like growing up in a house with a gas leak. You don't smell it because you've always been breathing it. Then someone from outside walks in and says something's wrong, and you realize the air that felt normal was slowly poisoning you. I was the person who walked in. The truck was the moment she smelled the gas. She talks to Don less now, not as a punishment, but as a boundary. There's a difference, and she's learning it. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. You can open them when it's safe, but you hold the key. Speaking of keys, I keep my truck keys in my pocket now, not on the hook by the door where they used to live, available to anyone who walked in and asked. In my pocket, next to my phone, where I can feel them every time I reach for something. A small, constant reminder that the things you own are only yours if you protect them, and the people you trust are only trustworthy until they prove otherwise. Last Sunday, I washed the truck. Same routine. Soap, rinse, dry, wax the hood where the sun hits hardest. Camille came outside with 2 coffees and sat on the porch steps and watched me work. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, I'm sorry I told you to lend it to him. I looked at her. She was holding her coffee with both hands, the way she does when she's cold or nervous or both. Her eyes were steady. No deflection. No but. Just the apology, clean and unqualified. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. I should have seen it. The signs were all there. The money request, the timing, the story about Greenville. I should have known. You loved your dad. That's not a crime. Trusting someone you love isn't a character flaw. No, she said. But ignoring what they are is. I wrung out the chamois. The truck gleamed. Dark blue, clean title, paid off, mine. 114,000 miles and still looking like 50, because when you've never owned anything, the first thing you own becomes a promise. And promises, unlike people, don't break unless you let them. Some people think I overreacted. his family, his friends, the people who hear he called the police on his father-in-law and decide I'm the bad guy without asking what the father-in-law did. I didn't overreact. I reacted. There's a difference. Overreacting is flipping a table because someone spilled coffee. Reacting is calling the police because someone stole your truck, forged your identity, sold your property, and lied about why. One of those is disproportionate. The other is proportionate. And the fact that Don is family doesn't change the proportion. It changes the pain. But pain isn't a reason to accept a crime. Pain is a reason to make sure it never happens again. The truck is in my driveway. My name is on the title. The keys are in my pocket. And the next time someone asks to borrow something of mine, the answer will depend on one thing and one thing only: whether the person asking has ever given me a reason to say no. Don gave me 9,000 reasons. And the truck in my driveway, with its 114,000 miles and its dark blue paint and its clean title with my name on it, is worth every single one of them. Not because it is valuable, because it is mine. And mine means something different now than it did before Don Whitaker sat at my kitchen table and told me he sold it. Before, mine meant ownership. Now, mine means vigilance. And I will never confuse trust with access again.